Hello, everybody. It's good to be back with you for another Bible study. And this is, of course, we're using the outline that I used and the message that I preached today. So I'm recording this Sunday afternoon, and I was going to record it Saturday, but it's feeling a little bit under the weather, so ended up waiting for today. And the text for today is Proverbs 18:24, a familiar text that I often use to start out with. And so, the title of this message for today, and I'm not gonna preach to you now. We're gonna, like I said, do this Bible study way, like we usually do in these online type of presentations. And the title of my message, though, today, the second service actually, this was why some people have a lot of friends. And you like to have more friends? Well, who wouldn't? I mean, people you could trust and love you and have your best interest in mind. We all want those kind of people, don't we? But there are people out there, and maybe you're one of them. There are those who don't think they have a friend in the world. You ever hear somebody say that? I don't have any friends. Well, that's not true. The song puts it this way: what a friend we have in Jesus. Jesus is a friend of everyone, whether they're believers or not, especially believers. So no one can say, really, I don't have any friends. Everybody has at least one friend, and that is Jesus. And probably you have more than that. You're just not aware of it. Too caught up in yourself to realize the friends that you really do have. Now, if you know Jesus, you have the best friend possible. And better than even a brother, a blood relative, who perhaps really loves you. Jesus loves you more. But if you want more than Jesus, that is, you like some friends with skin on, people, mortals, you'd like friends, more friends, then you need to listen to this. Why some people have a lot of friends. People like people who make them happier and encourage them to face life. And we will make close relationships or build close relationships with those who bless us, are a blessing. Generally, we won't warm up to people who are against us. I mean, it's just really a no-brainer. And we can sense when we're with somebody, whether they're for us or against us. And so we all want these people, we call them friends, who are for us. Well, this is, of course, obvious, a no-brainer. There's a twist to this. It's a two-way street, isn't it? This is not a one-sided arrangement, not at all. But first off, do we need friends? Let's answer that question before we really go any further. An acquaintance is a type of person that's sort of out of sight, out of mind, like someone you meet and you never see again, or maybe you see on a regular basis, but never goes beyond just, hi, how you doing? How's it going? That's just an acquaintance. You never really have any in-depth relationship with that person. A friend is someone you have a strong relationship with, that is in degrees. There are mild friendships all the way up to someone you could trust to, no matter what, might happen, you could trust them and they'd be there for you. So friendships are necessary because of social interaction. Social interaction is how life works. Social interaction is, quoting now, a building block of society. Social interaction. You know, people today want to be on social media. People want friends. Social media, it's almost like a game. Like they aren't real people, but there's people on your friends list, and some people have huge friends list. I used to have, actually at one time, 3 Facebook arrangements online, and 2 of them I had 5,000 members on 2 of them, and I think I had 2,000 or 3,000 on the 3rd one. And most of those people I didn't even know, I've never met. And some of them, boy, they were very encouraging to me, online, and when I had my heart surgery, and there was one time, I don't have those Facebooks anymore. I deleted them. I have one now, a new one, and only have about 30 friends listed on there. But I've changed my direction as far as social media is concerned. But years ago, a couple of years ago, when I had the large Facebook setups, I guess I could call it that. Like I say, when I had the surgery, I had hundreds of people that encouraged me. That people I've never met, never seen. But I put on there what I was going through and my surgery, and man, there was just an outpouring of positivity. There was just it's just a tremendous amount of encouragement. Even though I don't really know those people personally. And that's one thing about social media online. You never really get to know most of the people you interact with. You never know them personally. But they're there, and people have friends online until someone online does something they don't like, and then they unfriend them, and they're just gone. Well, in real life, we're supposed to develop meaningful friendships, and the friendships I think we have in social media are very shallow, flimsy. There's a cartoon that's about, you've probably seen it, where there's about 2 people at a funeral, and the director saying, he had 2,000 friends on Facebook, and look at this turnout, only 2 people there. He had 2,000 friends. Oh, well, that's the world, right? Warning, you want friends, choose wisely. Friends comfort us, enemies tell us the truth. That's some of my dry humor. And yes, that is a saying that I wrote. You probably figured that out, right? Again, friends comfort us, enemies tell us the truth. Humor, but a lot of truth to that, if you think it through. A friend will go easy on us, and the enemy will exaggerate. An enemy will not cut us any slack. An enemy will take some flaw that they see in our lives and magnify it 100 times and probably spread it all over. A friend will tend to overlook things and go easier on us, as I said. Our friends are able to see some sparks of goodness in our conduct, even when our overall conduct may not be very good. Our enemies look for shortcomings, and they amplify them. Enemies are often more valuable than friends. Like with friends, there are degrees of enemies. Just as there is degrees of enemies in friendship, Just as there are degrees of friendship, there are degrees of enemies. No, not all enemies are, looking to gun us down in the street. Some just subtly and deceitfully work to put us down and to turn people against us, and others can be very, physical. So there are different degrees of enemies. What do enemies do for us as believers? Well, they push us to the Lord. As you study the Bible, what you will see is all the greats in the Bible, all those that were used by God, and they were great because God used them, because of God's grace in their life. All these greats had enemies. And a matter of fact, the Bible itself, and I'll mention this again, I believe, as I get out of my notes, because I'm way ahead of my notes now. I don't even know where I am in them. But the Bible presupposes that we all have enemies. Now, we live in the United States of America, right? And how can I say this? In a lot of ways, the things that we experience here are, maybe I should say artificial, just not true to reality worldwide. Let's put it that way. Matter of fact, if you start in this country, if you start talking about enemies too much, people are going to start wondering about you. You think everybody's out to get you? Should the men in white coats come to pay you a visit? Are you hearing voices? That kind of thing. We don't think, but all through the Bible, you see this is true. God's people had enemies. All that live godly in Christ Jesus shall suffer persecution. But for some reason in America, it's just a strange thing. I don't get along with somebody. Somebody was mean to me or unfair. It was someone with whom I had a little tiff. It's never an enemy. It's a tiff, or we had a falling out or something. People in America do not speak in terms of enemies. Like I say, for the reasons like I've already stated. And that's unfortunate, because what we need to understand is someone who is not for us is against us. And someone who works to destroy us is very definitely an enemy. We say, well, no, people say, well, there's two sides to every story, and maybe it's 60-40, and we got all this junk, all this stuff going on. But the bottom line is, whether it's your fault or their fault, that's not what we're talking about. We're just talking about if you have somebody really opposes you, and it's gone way beyond corrective criticism or a love for you or anything like that. The wounds of a friend, that kind of thing. It's gone way beyond that to where they're being mean and vicious and spreading stuff about you. The Bible warns against gossip. It's wicked and sinful it is, and they're doing that kind of thing. It's an enemy, folks. It's not just somebody you're having a tiff with. It's an enemy. Enemies are often more valuable than friends. I've said that, and I'll say that again and again, more times in this message. Nobody likes to have an enemy. And if I asked this morning in church, and I didn't, for a show of hands, how many of you want an enemy? There would not have been a single hand raised. Nobody wants an enemy. Nobody likes enemies. But properly understood, enemies are, in a strange way, a blessing. This is one reason why we are to pray for our enemies. The Bible tells us to do that. Let's take a look at Matthew chapter 5, the Sermon on the Mount text. A lot of people misunderstand the Sermon on the Mount. True, Christ is still living. He hasn't died on the cross yet. Technically, it's still the Old Testament arrangement. But Christ, in a way, in a sense. But there's a change because the Messiah is now present. He's preaching the gospel of the kingdom. He's offering the kingdom to the Jewish people. And in offering the kingdom to the people, he's being very clear about the will of the Father. You know, that's what's important in our lives, that we do the will of God, that we do the will of the Father. And we know that we're doing his will as we, compare our actions and deeds with what the scriptures say and compare ourselves with the Bible, the Word of God. And what Jesus was doing in the Sermon on the Mount was he was bringing those who were hung up on the Old Testament way of thinking, let's put it that way, where it was an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, revenge, get revenge, that sort of a mindset. Someone does you dirty, you get them. That was the thinking. They had a lot of wrong thoughts back in the Old Testament times. Polygamy, there was all kinds of things going on that were not the will of God. But Jesus pointed out on the Sermon on the Mount what the will of God is. Laid in Matthew 5, verse 43, we'll start there. Ye have heard that it hath been said, Thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. That ye may be, now notice this, that ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. Rain being good, they need rain for their crops. Now what is the application to us today in the New Testament, the New Covenant? What is the application to us? Well, as I've already said, the Bible presupposes that most believers have enemies. We have enemies. And we are to return good for evil. Now, why do this? That ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. You see, God does good to those that hate him. He gives them food to eat. He gives them air to breathe and water to drink. He sends rain for their crops. He takes care of those who hate him. So actually what the Sermon on the Mount is all about is Jesus was telling these people, you want to enter into the kingdom? It was a legitimate offer. Of course, they rejected it because they rejected him. But you want to enter into the kingdom, which is yet future, the millennial kingdom. And it was offered in that day, but they rejected it. You want to enter into the kingdom. You want to be out from under the Romans. You want to be restored as God's people. Then, do not be the kind of people that seek revenge. Do good. And when there's evil, counteract that with goodness, with righteousness. Why do this? Because that's the way God does things. Yes, God also judges, and he spanks, he chastens, and that's not pleasant, but he does it for our own good, to bring us out of that evil. And God will do that. Vengeance belongs to God. It does not belong to us. Anytime any believer tries to get even, they're way out of line with the Bible, because that's God's job. He's gonna see that, everybody gets their comeuppance, as they used to say, and God's going to take care of all these things. We can't take care of all those wrongs. I call this the survival text. We can survive most any attack if we heed this text. This text doesn't say, love your enemies' ways. Now, we're to love our enemies, not their ways, not what they do. Love your enemies, God does. So we're being like God. We're being, in other words, Christ-like, if we do this. Don't hang around with them, with your enemies. Talk to them as little as possible, but be thankful for them. Remember, they push us to the Lord. They motivate us. They encourage spiritual health. Why? Because when we're under pressure, that's when we start getting interested in our spiritual health. When we have an enemy and it's working against us and we're hurting, then suddenly we become aware of the fact, hey, I need to be a stronger believer. I need to be in the Word more. I need to be serious about my faith. This is what enemies do. You see, the predator prey thing. You see back in Psalms how even creation communicates spiritual truth. That's why God made the world the way He made it. Why there's the predator-prey relationship. They say in Africa everything wakes up on it running, because there's an enemy, there's a predator out there. And the predators keep the very species stronger. They weed out the weaker ones. And so in the spiritual realm, there are predators. There are, wolves. Beware of wolves. And the animal wolf in the New Testament. I used to do a lot of writing on that. I had a series and a publication that I had called Wolf Tracks. And each writing I did was to demonstrate how way the wolf operates, the wolf pack operates, is how unbelievers, unsaved people work. People who perhaps think they're saved, but they're really not. They're led by Satan. And how these enemies of God's children work. Study the wolf packs, very interesting. That's why Jesus referred to them that way as wolves. First of all, love your enemies. God does. Don't hang around with your enemies. You say, I think I have an enemy. Well, that's not too hard to figure out. Every time you're with them, they're hostile. You're trying to be nice. They're going to look for something to blow up on and nail you with. You got to tiptoe on eggshells every time you're around them. Hello, it's an enemy. Okay, why are they an enemy? Well, that's where the soul searching comes in, and we consider everything we've done and confess any known sin and all, etc., etc. And that's good for us to do that. It's always good for us to do that. We evaluate ourselves. But we got to be wise in the way we deal with enemies. And that's a really interesting study as you get in the Bible. But I'm just going to cover some surface things here. Don't hang around with them. Be around them as little as possible. Talk to them as little as possible. And if you have to have a communication with them, let them do most of the talking. And, all right, what do they do for us? Enemies push us to the Lord. We didn't have any opposition. We didn't have that predator-prey thing in the spiritual realm. We get lazy, diseased spiritually. And, the predators out there in the world, in the animal world, they weed out the weaker of the species so the species can continue on and be stronger in the future. And that's the same reason why we have spiritual predators. Spiritual predators, you see them very clearly in those that stood against Christ and moved the people to crucify him. And the enemies of our Lord very clearly there. Sometimes it's not so clear. But in some cases it is. Christ spoke about wolves, and we have them, don't we? So that's the way it is as far as that goes. Their enemies are concerned. They exist in the world for our good. I know that's hard to say, but that's why we have enemies. And without enemies, we would not have the motivation. And God used enemies against Israel and raised them up, to motivate the Israelites, to motivate Israel. And so they suffered, and then they'd repent, and they'd get right for a while, and then they'd drift back in the old ways. And so, while the thought of an enemy is very distasteful, and there is nobody in their right mind who wants an enemy, other times something that's good for us we don't want, but it's just we just have to do it. You have to deal with it. It's like when my heart surgery. I didn't want to have a heart valve put in and aneurysm repaired, but after the doctor told me the consequences of not having this done would be, and not maybe be, but would be, well, that convinced me to do something I didn't want to do. We can't always have everything we want, and we don't want enemies, that is for sure, but there are times when we need them. Well, don't worry about it. The Lord will take care of that. He knows when we need them in our lives, but it's a much better thing to be self-motivated so that the Lord doesn't have to allow enemies into our lives to accomplish that in us. That's the way we ought to be, self-motivated and consider ourselves, like the communion text, just to examine ourselves. If we did that, then we wouldn't need that experience. But being slothful as we are, and we just tend to sweep things under the rug, that's why we need enemies. Now, is everyone that says something negative to us an enemy? No. Well, the Bible talks about the wounds of a brother, a faithful one, and sometimes our friends have to say things that are we don't want to hear. But that's a different thing. When it's a friend, their desire is to build us up. They're praying for us. They're not running around gossiping. They're not trying to get people on their side. They're not being hateful. They're coming back and say, hey, what can I do to help? All right, I'm sorry I had to tell you this or share this with you, but I'm praying for you, and I am really interested in being kind that way. No, an enemy's not going to do that. That's the kind of thing a brother's going to do. That's the one like a Christian is going to do. An enemy is going to be mean, try to undermine you, try to destroy you, and quite often they think they're doing God's will. They think they're God's children while they're doing it. It's a very sad thing. I've had to deal with people over the years in ministry, and I think that the most hateful and hurtful people in the world are professing believers. And, that's the way it was with Christ, wasn't it? Who was it that was his worst enemies? It was those that claimed to be believers in God and followers of God, the religious. All right, now, that's the enemy thing and the advantage of enemies. Well, now back to the friendships. Again, we don't want enemies. We want friends. And to develop friendships, both parties must want the relationship to continue. And here's an old saying. I don't know the source. I like me better when I'm with you. Did you ever hear that? I got that offline, and it's a good saying. I don't remember. That's right. The source was unknown. Someone just put it on there. I like me better when I'm with you. What that person was saying was this, I think. When I hang around with people who are spiritual, I'm not saying perfect and all that, but they kind of people who obey the Lord, and they want to encourage me. They want me to feel better. They want to be there for me when I have a need. When I'm around people like that, I like myself better. And when I'm around people that I should not be around, who are destructive and unscriptural in the way they conduct themselves, I don't like myself very much. Why? Because I tend to become like those I hang around with. They influence me. And, when I hang around people who are a blessing, I will be a blessing. I hang around with people who are critical and mean, and have some sort of suppressed hatred in their heart, I will go that direction. I will be that way. So we have to understand friendships. We are all influenced by those we are with. Now, some people lift you to a higher plane, and you think, grander thoughts, you're a happier person, and others just are, it's a downer to be around it. We don't need that. No one needs that from us. It's a two-way street. What am I talking about? Well, sometimes we learn more by way of bad examples than we do good examples. Sometimes we do. But we need the good examples. We need, for the most part, to hang around with people who are right with God and are trying to live for the Lord, and who are not the kind of people that are gossipy, are not trying to put someone down, not trying to cause some kind of trouble, but people who are loving and forgiving. Those are the kind of people that are a tremendous blessing. You know someone like that. Well, if you want them as a friend, you got to be like them. Because they're going to be wise enough to know to dump you if you start trying to feed them poison. It won't work. They won't want to be around you. So you want friends? No. You don't just want anybody. You want good friends. Now to have a good friend, you've got to work on yourself. You see? It's a two-way street. Sure, all of us want people to lift us up and make us feel better. We got to ask ourselves, am I that type of person? Or am I the kind of person that's just grumpy, complaining all the time? And people don't want to be around people who are constantly complaining. And so the only kind of friends you can get are other complainers. If you're a complainer, that's the only kind of friends you can get. If you're the kind of person that's got some secret bitterness you're harboring inside and you're really full of acid, those are the only kind of friends you're going to get. You see, we get what we are. And when we deal with our hearts and deal with our attitudes, that's when we start living right. And that's when we start having the opportunities to develop really great friendships. Ever hear the saying, me thinks, me complains too much? The original saying goes, the lady doth protest too much, me thinks. It's a line from the play Hamlet by Shakespeare. The phrase is used in everyday speech to indicate doubt of someone's sincerity. The lady doth protest too much, methinks. Like that. Too much complaining kills friendships or close relationships. Back in our earlier days, we had big falling out with someone, and particularly me, and that was a very difficult time. But some of the things I experienced before we moved up here, before I came to this ministry, helped prepare me for this. But not all the way, and it was really hard. I lost a lot of weight. I was going to die at one point. I think I lost over 50 pounds. And I just couldn't eat. I was depressed. But then, while all this was happening, what did it do? It drove me to the Lord, closer to the Lord. Judy and I prayed together like we never prayed together before. The soul searching, evaluating myself. It was a tremendous time of spiritual growth, even though it was a horrible, horrible experience. And like I told the people this morning, I blew it. I've had to learn everything the hard way. All my life it's been that way. A pastor of a larger church, long distance from here, called me. He heard about the thing I was going through. And he called to encourage me. And what I do, all they did is complain. and trying to vindicate myself. And the Bible warns us about that. We don't vindicate ourselves. The Lord is in charge of that. He's the one that takes care of all that stuff, and that's his business. That's not ours. Sure, we can defend ourselves, but there's a difference in just whining and complaining and going on and on and on. That's what I did, and I kind of spoiled the opportunity for a great friendship there with that guy. And I could tell he just got tired of me complaining always, oh, woe is me, and it was woe. I mean, for somebody who likes to eat like I do, lose 50, 60, or maybe it was 70 pounds over like 6 month period. Because, I mean, I just about killed me. The pressure that was against us in that time. Wow. But in pouring all that out on him, and he was a nice guy, and I mean, I don't know where he is now. That he's moved to another state, I guess. But it could have been a chance there for an ongoing, closer friendship. But nobody wants to listen to somebody complaining or feeling sorry for themselves. So we got to remember that you want friends. First of all, if something goes wrong or you're facing some struggle, a lot of times that's when you'll have the opportunity to develop some real good friendships. Number one, take it from me, lessons learned by way of experience. Don't vindicate yourself. Don't even try. Yes, defend yourself, but don't try to clear yourself, and don't keep harping on that. Secondly, seek wisdom and insight from those wiser and with more experience. Thirdly, pray and confess. Confess any known sins. And above all, don't fall into the me thinks, thee complains too much syndromes. Oh boy. Oh. Yes, friends are there for us in hard times. But understand, let them know. Don't say everything you know. That's a basic rule. Learn not to say everything you know, and be careful about, accusing people of things you don't know for sure. And you're hurting. Sure, the Lord can place someone in your life with whom you can share, and they'll be there to pray for you. But when you talk to that person after that, just don't keep harping on that thing, Talk about other things. Talk about their ministry, how they're being blessed, fishing, hunting, anything. But get off that. And don't spoil the possibility of a good friendship. Confess it to the Lord if you are suffering from hatred, bitterness from the past. So many people have bitterness in their lives, and confess it as sin, because it is. We're told to love one another, even our enemies. Do good to your enemies. Speak well of them, and love them, and pray for them. And you'll be like God in that. The way he handles himself, he conducts himself. And then you'll be blessed. Thank you for listening to this little Bible study / rambling, whatever you want to call it. And hope to see you for sure this coming Resurrection Sunday. And I hope you're preparing for that as well. Thank you.